The morning sun painted golden streaks across the quiet farming colony of New Brighton. 7-year-old Lucy Thompson knelt in her family's vegetable garden, carefully picking ripe tomatoes and placing them in her small wicker basket. Her blonde hair caught the sunlight as she hummed a cheerful tune, completely unaware that this peaceful Tuesday morning would change everything. Her father Mark worked nearby, his weathered hands checking the irrigation system that kept their crops healthy. A former soldier-turned-farmer, he had brought his family to this remote colony to escape the violence of the inner worlds. Here, surrounded by rolling green hills and clear blue skies, he thought they had found true safety. Rebecca Thompson hung laundry on the line behind their small farmhouse, occasionally glancing over to make sure Lucy stayed within the garden's boundaries. The colony had no dangerous wildlife, but a mother's protective instincts never truly rested. New Brighton housed about 300 families, all seeking the same thing Mark had wanted, a quiet place to raise children away from the chaos of more populated worlds. Their only defenses were automated turrets designed to scare off the occasional wild animal. No one expected trouble this far from the shipping lanes. That peaceful illusion shattered when the sky tore open. A sleek black craft materialized above the colony without warning, its hull so dark it seemed to swallow light itself. The ship moved with predatory grace, circling once before selecting a landing spot in the meadow just beyond the Thompson farm. Lucy looked up from her tomatoes, shading her eyes with one small hand. "Daddy, what's that?" Mark felt ice form in his stomach. He recognized military vessels when he saw them, and this craft radiated menace like heat from a forge. "Lucy, come here. Now." The ship touched down with barely a whisper, its advanced engines making no sound at all. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a section of the hull simply faded away, revealing a dark opening that seemed to lead into the depths of space itself. What emerged from that darkness would fuel Lucy's nightmares for years to come. The creature stood nearly 8 feet tall on powerful legs that ended in razor-sharp claws. Its body was covered in natural armor that gleamed purple-black in the morning sun. 4 arms extended from its torso, each ending in hands that looked more like weapons than appendages. But it was the head that truly marked this being as something from humanity's worst fears, elongated and predatory, filled with rows of needle-sharp teeth that dripped with clear fluid. This was Kethvar, a Ravager scout from the hunting fleets that terrorized the Outer Rim colonies. His kind viewed other species as nothing more than prey to be harvested, sold, or consumed. He had personally overseen the capture of thousands of sentient beings across 17 different worlds. Kethvar's compound eyes swept across the peaceful farm, analyzing everything with cold efficiency. Adult humans were valuable as laborers, but children brought premium prices in the slave markets. Their terror was considered a delicacy among certain buyers, and their smaller size made them easier to transport and control. The alien's gaze fixed on Lucy, who stood frozen in the garden with her basket of tomatoes clutched against her chest. Perfect. Young, healthy, and completely defenseless. This harvest would begin well. Mark saw the creature's attention focus on his daughter and felt his military training surge back to life. He was 20 yards away, too far to reach Lucy before the alien could act. His rifle was locked in the house, useless at this distance. All he could do was run and pray. "Lucy, run!" he shouted, sprinting across the garden rows with desperate speed. But Lucy couldn't move. The sight of the nightmare creature had locked her muscles in pure terror. She could only watch as Kethvar raised what looked like a weapon, its surface crackling with deadly energy. The Ravager took one step toward the paralyzed child, then another. Each movement was calculated and precise, the approach of a predator that had never known failure. Kethvar's mandibles clicked with anticipation as he prepared to stun his first prize. That's when something small and orange stepped between them. Mittens had been enjoying his morning nap in a warm patch of sunlight when the alien ship arrived. The 3-year-old tabby cat was nothing special, just an ordinary house pet who spent most of his time sleeping, eating, and occasionally batting at dust particles that danced in the afternoon light. He had never caught anything more dangerous than a lazy moth, and his biggest achievement was learning to open the pantry door when his food bowl ran empty. But now Mittens stood directly in Kethvar's path, his back arched and his orange fur standing on end. The cat's green eyes blazed with an intensity that seemed impossible for such a small creature. Kethvar paused, more puzzled than concerned. In all his years of hunting across the galaxy, he had never encountered a creature foolish enough to challenge a Ravager. Certainly not something so pathetically small and defenseless. The alien looked down at this minor obstacle and made a sound that might have been laughter. One casual swipe of his claws would remove this insignificant interruption, then he could claim his prize and return to his ship. Kethvar reached down with one massive arm, claws extended to brush aside the foolish little creature. Mittens moved. What happened next would be discussed and debated by scientists for generations, but in that moment, all that mattered was that an ordinary house cat had decided to take a stand against the darkness. What happened next defied everything HFY knew about the universe. Mittens, the lazy tabby who had never moved faster than a casual stroll to his food bowl, suddenly became something else entirely. The cat flowed like liquid lightning, sliding beneath the alien's massive claws with impossible grace. HFY's hand swept through empty air where the orange fur ball had been just a heartbeat before. The Ravager stumbled slightly, confused by the miss. Nothing that small should be able to move so fast. Mittens landed in a perfect crouch 3 feet away, his tail lashing back and forth like an angry whip. His green eyes never left the alien's face, and in those depths was something that made even the battle-hardened warrior pause. Intelligence. Purpose. And something else that HFY had never seen directed at his kind before, absolute fearlessness. The alien straightened, his forearms flexing as irritation replaced amusement. This delay was becoming annoying. He had a schedule to keep, and one small earth creature would not interfere with his mission. HFY lunged forward with all 4 hands, determined to simply grab the cat and toss it aside. But Mittens seemed to know exactly where each claw would strike before the alien even moved. The cat twisted through the air in ways that looked more like flying than jumping, avoiding every swipe with fluid precision. One of Mittens' paws brushed across HFY's armored forearm as he spun past. The alien felt a sharp sting and looked down in shock. 3 thin scratches marked his armor, scratches that should have been impossible. Ravager battle gear was designed to withstand plasma fire and explosive impacts. No primitive creature should be able to damage it with natural claws. But there were the marks, shallow but undeniable. Lucy watched from the garden, her basket of tomatoes forgotten at her feet. Her beloved pet, who usually needed help jumping onto the couch, was dancing around a monster 10 times his size like he was born for battle. Mittens moved with a warrior's precision, always staying just out of reach, always keeping himself between Lucy and the alien threat. Mark continued his desperate sprint across the garden, but he was still too far away. Rebecca had dropped her laundry and was running too, but she was even further behind. They could only watch as their daughter's life hung in the balance, protected by nothing more than 3 pounds of orange fur and stubborn courage. HFY's confusion was turning to anger. He raised his plasma stunner, the weapon humming to life with deadly energy. The blast would reduce the annoying creature to ash in seconds. He took careful aim at the cat's small form. Mittens looked directly at the weapon, his head tilted slightly as if studying it. For one terrible moment, Lucy thought her pet was frozen with fear just as she had been. Then the stunner fired, and Mittens simply wasn't there. The energy bolt seared through the air where the cat had been standing, leaving a smoking crater in the earth behind him. But Mittens had moved before the trigger was pulled, flowing to the left like he knew exactly where the blast would go. HFY fired again, then again. Each time, the cat avoided the deadly beams with supernatural grace. He moved in patterns that seemed random but were somehow perfectly calculated. Left, then right, then an impossible leap that carried him over a blast that should have been unavoidable. The orange tabby's fur began to shimmer with an almost electric quality, standing on end until he looked twice his normal size. His eyes blazed with green fire that seemed to see right through the alien's armor to whatever passed for a soul beneath. Other colonists were arriving now, drawn by the sound of energy weapons. They found an impossible scene, a house cat holding off one of the galaxy's most feared predators through sheer will and mysterious skill. Tom Bradley, who lived 2 farms over, rubbed his eyes in disbelief. Is that really Mittens? The same cat who gets tired walking to his water bowl? Mrs. Peterson nodded slowly, her ancient parrot Charlie shifting nervously on her shoulder. That's him all right. But he's moving like something else entirely. HFY was growing desperate. His weapon's energy cell was running low, and he had never missed so many shots in his long career. Worse, other humans were gathering, and his tactical training warned against being surrounded by unknown hostiles. This simple harvest was becoming a dangerous situation. The alien activated his emergency beacon, calling for immediate extraction. He had faced the warriors of 17 worlds and never retreated from such a small force. But something about the way that tiny earth creature moved, the way it seemed to predict his every action, filled him with an unfamiliar emotion. Fear. As his ship's engines powered up for emergency departure, HFY backed toward the craft, his stunner still aimed at the cat. Mittens followed step by step, never letting the alien get closer to Lucy, never showing the slightest sign of backing down. The moment the ship lifted off and disappeared into the blue sky, Mittens sat down in the grass and began grooming his left paw as if nothing unusual had happened. The electric shimmer faded from his fur, and his eyes returned to their normal sleepy green. Lucy ran to her pet and scooped him up, tears streaming down her face. "Good kitty," she whispered into his orange fur. "Good Mittens." The cat purred contentedly and nuzzled her cheek, once again just an ordinary pet who wanted breakfast and a sunny spot for his afternoon nap. But everyone who witnessed that impossible battle knew they had seen something that would change their understanding of the universe forever. Dr. James Morrison stared at the security footage for the 20th time that morning, his coffee growing cold as he watched the impossible scene play out on his computer screen. The colony's cameras had captured every moment of the encounter between Mittens and the alien creature, but watching it again and again only made it more confusing. "Helen, come look at this part," he called to his research assistant, pointing at the screen. "Watch how Mittens moves here, right before the alien fires." Dr. Helen Clark leaned over his shoulder, her glasses reflecting the bright monitor. She had worked with James for 5 years studying the local wildlife, but nothing in their experience had prepared them for this. "He starts moving before the weapon even charges up," she whispered. "Look at the timing. The cat is already in motion while the alien is still aiming." James nodded grimly. "Exactly. It's like Mittens knew what was going to happen before it happened. But that's impossible. Cats don't have precognitive abilities." They had run every test they could think of on the footage. Frame-by-frame analysis, movement tracking, energy signature detection. All of it confirmed what their eyes had seen but their minds struggled to accept. An ordinary house cat had somehow outmaneuvered a technologically advanced alien warrior. "The neural scans came back from Dr. Patterson," Helen said, pulling up another screen. "You're not going to believe this." The brain scan of Mittens showed patterns that made James lean forward in surprise. During the encounter with the alien, the cat's neural activity had spiked to levels that should have been impossible for his small brain to handle. New pathways had formed, creating connections between areas that normally didn't communicate. "It's like his brain was temporarily rewired," James muttered. "But look at this scan from yesterday." The second image showed Mittens' brain activity had returned to completely normal levels. Whatever had happened during the fight was gone, leaving behind an ordinary cat brain with ordinary cat thoughts about food and napping. Before they could discuss it further, the colony's alarm system began blaring. James grabbed his communication device and heard the panicked voice of the guard tower. Multiple contacts approaching from the north. 3 alien craft, same design as yesterday. James and Helen ran outside to see the black ships descending on different parts of the colony. The aliens had returned with reinforcements, and this time they were spreading out to avoid being stopped by a single defender. But what happened next made James question everything he thought he knew about Earth animals. In the northern district, 8-year-old Tommy Bradley was playing in his backyard when one of the alien craft landed nearby. As the creature emerged and began moving toward the boy, his German Shepherd Max stepped between them. The dog's eyes took on the same blazing intensity they had seen in Mittens, and Max began moving with coordination that looked more military than animal. 2 blocks away, elderly Mrs. Peterson was tending her garden when another alien approached. Her ancient parrot Charlie, who usually could barely fly from his perch to his food dish, suddenly took to the air with grace that would have impressed a fighter pilot. The bird began calling out warnings and diving at the alien with perfect timing, always staying just out of reach of the creature's claws. In the southern neighborhood, the Williams family's golden retriever Buddy was displaying pack coordination with 3 other neighborhood dogs. They moved together like they had trained for months, circling their alien threat and taking turns distracting it while keeping the Williams children safely behind them. "James, are you seeing this?" Helen's voice cracked with excitement as she watched through her binoculars. Every pet in the colony was changing. Cats that had been lazy and sleepy were now moving like trained assassins. Dogs that had never shown aggression beyond playful wrestling were coordinating like military units. Even the smaller pets were contributing, rabbits digging strategic holes, hamsters chewing through alien equipment that fell within their reach. But James noticed something crucial. The animals only changed when their human families were in direct danger. The moment the aliens retreated or moved away from the children and adults they were protecting, the pets returned to normal behavior. "Helen, get me all the data we have on human-animal bonding," James said urgently, his scientific mind racing to connect the pieces. Pet ownership patterns, emotional attachment studies, everything. As Helen pulled up files, James watched Mrs. Peterson's parrot execute a perfect aerial maneuver to confuse an alien warrior. Charlie was 40 years old and normally had trouble flying across a single room. But now the bird moved like a fighter ace, calling out tactical information that somehow helped the other animals coordinate their defenses. "Look at this research from Earth," Helen said, pointing to her screen. "Studies showing that pet owners and their animals develop synchronized brain wave patterns over time. The emotional bond actually creates measurable neurological connections." James felt pieces of the puzzle beginning to fit together. What if the bond goes deeper than we thought? What if thousands of years of living together, caring for each other, has created something new? The alien ships were retreating now, their crews apparently as confused and frustrated as James felt fascinated. As the black craft disappeared into the sky, every enhanced animal in the colony returned to normal. Dogs went back to chasing balls, cats resumed their napping schedules, and Charlie settled back onto his favorite perch to preen his feathers. "We need to study this more," James said quietly. "Because I think we've just discovered that the relationship between humans and their pets is far more powerful than anyone imagined." Outside, Lucy Thompson was hugging Mittens while the orange cat purred contentedly, already forgetting his heroic moment in favor of thinking about lunch. Dr. James Morrison hadn't slept in 36 hours. Empty coffee cups littered his desk while data files covered every available surface in his small laboratory. The pieces of an impossible puzzle were finally coming together in his tired mind, and the picture they formed would change everything humanity thought they knew about their place in the universe. Helen Clark found him there at dawn, surrounded by brain scans, behavioral studies, and ancient research papers about human evolution. His hair stuck up at odd angles, and his eyes were red from staring at computer screens, but there was an excitement in his expression that made her pause. "James? You look terrible. When did you last eat?" He turned to her with the wild look of a scientist who had just discovered fire. "Helen, we've been thinking about this all wrong. Completely backwards." The holographic display above his desk showed two brain scans side by side, one human, one feline. During yesterday's alien encounters, both brains had shown identical patterns of neural activity in areas that should have had nothing in common. "We assumed something was enhancing the animals from outside," James continued, his voice growing stronger as the theory took shape. "Some kind of alien technology or cosmic radiation. But it's not coming from outside at all. It's coming from us." Helen pulled up a chair, her scientific training warring with the impossible implications of what she was seeing. "What are you suggesting exactly?" James activated another display showing thousands of years of human history. Cave paintings of people with dogs. Ancient Egyptian art featuring cats. Medieval manuscripts showing falconers with their birds. In every era, in every culture, humans had chosen to share their lives with other species. For 10,000 years, we've been living with companion animals. We called it domestication, but that's just part of the story. We changed them, yes, but they changed us too. We evolved together. The data was overwhelming. Study after study showed that humans who lived with pets developed different neural patterns than those who didn't. Pet owners had enhanced empathy centers, stronger emotional regulation, and increased ability to read nonverbal communication cues. But the animals changed too, Helen said, following his logic. Dogs learned to read human facial expressions. Cats developed vocalization specifically to communicate with humans. They adapted to understand us. Exactly. And over thousands of generations, those changes became deeper. Physical. Mental. Emotional. James pulled up genetic analysis data that made Helen gasp. The DNA of domestic animals shows markers that appear nowhere in their wild cousins. Markers that correspond to human genetic sequences associated with bonding and empathy. The implications were staggering. Humans hadn't just tamed wild animals, they had created new species through emotional connection. The bond between people and their pets had literally rewritten the genetic code of both species. Quantum entanglement, Helen whispered, understanding flooding her features. The emotional bonds create actual neural connections across species barriers. Most of the time it's subtle, James explained. Why your cat seems to know when you're sad. Why your dog waits by the door 5 minutes before you come home from work. The connection is always there, but it operates below conscious awareness. He activated another display showing yesterday's battle footage. Frame by frame, they could see the exact moment when each animal's behavior changed. It always happened when their human family faced immediate danger. But when survival instincts kick in, when the bond is threatened by external force, the connection amplifies. The animals don't just get faster or stronger, they become extensions of human will and intelligence. Helen studied the data with growing amazement. During the encounters, Mittens had demonstrated tactical thinking that matched his owner's father's military training. Mrs. Peterson's parrot had shown aerial coordination that reflected the old woman's years as a flight instructor. Each animal had accessed not just their owner's skills, but their deepest protective instincts. The German shepherd, Max, he moved like he had Mark Thompson's combat experience, Helen realized. And the parrot flew with maneuvers that Mrs. Peterson learned in the Air Force 50 years ago. The bond works both ways, James confirmed. The animals access human knowledge and determination. But humans also tap into animal instincts, enhanced reflexes, predatory awareness, pack coordination. Together, they become something greater than either species alone. A soft chime indicated an incoming message from Earth Command. James opened the communication and felt his blood turn cold. Long-range sensors had detected a massive alien fleet approaching the outer colonies. Not just Ravager scouts this time, but a full hunting armada with harvest ships and battle cruisers. 12 capital ships, Helen read over his shoulder. Plus support vessels. They're planning to take the entire sector. James looked at his research data, then at the tactical reports flowing in from Earth's defense networks. Humanity's regular military forces were spread too thin to mount an effective defense. The colonies would have to face this threat with whatever resources they had. Send a message to all colony administrators, he said quietly. Tell them to gather their families close. Make sure every child is with their pets. And hope that love really is stronger than fear. Outside his laboratory window, James could see families throughout New Brighton doing exactly that. Parents called their children home from school. Pet owners brought their animals inside. And in that gathering, in that instinctive protective response, something ancient and powerful began to awaken. The bond between human and animal, forged over millennia of shared evolution, was about to face its greatest test. And the outcome would determine not just the fate of New Brighton, but humanity's future among the stars. The alien fleet emerged from hyperspace like a dark storm cloud, 12 massive ships blocking out the morning sun over New Brighton. Admiral Vexthal stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying the peaceful farming colony below through the viewing portal. His mandibles clicked with satisfaction as he counted the structures and estimated the population. 300 families, reported his tactical officer. Excellent breeding stock. The young ones will bring premium prices. Vexthal had personally overseen the harvest of 4 to 7 worlds. He had seen desperate last stands, futile military resistance, and pathetic attempts at negotiation. None of it had ever slowed his operations by more than a few hours. This remote farming settlement would be no different. Deploy the capture nets, he commanded. Standard harvest protocol. Sort the specimens by age and health after we have them secured. But as the energy nets descended toward New Brighton, something began happening that made even the experienced admiral pause. Every pet in the colony moved to stand beside their human families, and as they did, the air itself seemed to shimmer with invisible power. Lucy Thompson sat on her front porch steps, holding Mittens tightly against her chest. The orange tabby's green eyes began to glow with that same fierce intensity from 3 days ago, but this time the change felt deeper, more permanent. Around the colony, similar transformations rippled outward like waves on a pond. Mark Thompson felt something extraordinary happening as he knelt beside his daughter and her cat. His military training, his tactical knowledge, his years of combat experience, all of it was flowing through an invisible connection into Mittens' small form. But more than that, he could sense the cat's natural hunting instincts, his perfect balance, his ability to move in absolute silence. Together, they had become something greater than either could be alone. Tom Bradley watched his German Shepherd Max coordinate with the neighborhood dogs in patterns that would have impressed elite military units. The animals moved with purpose and intelligence that went far beyond normal pack behavior. They were planning, strategizing, preparing for battle with the wisdom of both species combined. Mrs. Peterson's 40-year-old parrot Charlie spread his wings and took flight with the grace of a fighter pilot, his elderly owner's Air Force training flowing through their decades-old bond. The bird's sharp eyes could spot threats from incredible distances, and his ability to fly gave him tactical advantages no human could match. Even the smallest pets were transforming. The Williams family's hamster began chewing through alien equipment with teeth that somehow found the exact weak points in advanced technology. Rabbits throughout the colony started digging tunnel networks that would allow rapid movement and communication between families. Admiral Vexthal watched his capture nets malfunction and fall harmlessly to the ground, somehow disabled by tiny earth creatures that his scanners registered as non-threatening animals. "What are these readings?" he demanded. "The energy signatures don't match our databases." His science officer looked up from his instruments with confusion written across his scaled features. The primitive creatures are displaying coordinated intelligence patterns, Admiral. It's as if they are accessing the tactical knowledge of the adult humans while retaining their own physical advantages. Impossible, Vexthal snarled. Deploy ground forces. Let's see how these enhanced pets handle real warriors. The first wave of Ravager soldiers landed in the town square, expecting to face a few dozen farmers with primitive weapons. Instead, they found themselves surrounded by an integrated defense network unlike anything in their military experience. Mittens led the initial response, moving through the alien formation like liquid lightning. But he wasn't alone. Every cat in the colony moved with him, their attacks perfectly coordinated, always striking where the aliens were weakest while staying safely out of reach of their weapons. The dogs formed the second line of defense, using pack tactics enhanced by human strategic thinking. They herded the aliens into predetermined positions, cut off escape routes, and protected the human families with unwavering determination. Above, the birds provided aerial reconnaissance that allowed the ground forces to anticipate every alien movement. Charlie called out warnings in clear English, coordinating the defense with the precision of an experienced battle commander. Admiral Vexthal watched his elite soldiers being systematically outmaneuvered by household pets and felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 centuries of conquest. Fear. Real, genuine fear of creatures that massed less than his smallest weapon. "Sir," his communications officer reported with a trembling voice, "we're receiving similar reports from harvest fleets across 17 systems. Every world with domesticated Earth animals is showing the same defensive patterns." The Admiral realized with growing horror that his species had encountered something completely outside their understanding. The humans hadn't just domesticated animals, they had created warrior bonds that transcended individual species limitations. As his remaining forces retreated to their ships, Vexthal made a decision that would echo across the galaxy. He activated the fleet-wide communication system and broadcast a message that reached every Ravager ship in known space. All vessels are ordered to avoid systems containing Earth-origin humans and their companion animals. Mark all such worlds as Category 5 hazards. The domesticated creatures demonstrate unknown symbiotic warfare capabilities that exceed our tactical parameters. The massive fleet turned and jumped to hyperspace, leaving New Brighton in peace. As the last alien ship disappeared, every enhanced animal in the colony returned to normal. Dogs went back to wagging their tails, cats resumed their napping schedules, and Charlie settled onto his perch to preen his feathers. Lucy hugged Mittens while the tabby purred contentedly, already thinking about lunch. Around them, families throughout the colony celebrated with their pets, understanding finally that the greatest strength humanity possessed wasn't technology or weapons. It was love.